Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. So every payment we make throughout our life is recorded and can potentially be used against us. Not only can what we say be used against us, but what we pay can be used against us, or what we don't pay. So guess what? That payment you were late on 3 years ago might impact your ability to buy that house that you have been saving up for. Oftentimes, we don't know or fully understand the potential barriers to building financial security and getting the thing we want most in life, like a credit score. Yeah, let's eliminate it. How about that? Time to get down to business. The business of being Black today is America's credit rating system. Kick it or keep it. Please welcome credit expert Arnita Johnson-Hall to the show. Hi, Arnita.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
A fellow in the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, Kristen Brody. Hi, Kristen.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Online educator Irvin Pena is with us today. Hi, Irvin.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
And the personal finance columnist for the Washington Post, Michelle Singletary, is on board. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So why should Black people care about America's credit system? Michelle, you want to kick things off?
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of things that, if you want to get a loan for a car or a home, or even your insurance is impacted by your credit score. Historically, African Americans have had lower credit scores because a lot of the information that goes into the recipe for credit scores doesn't include how we pay our bills. For example, we are more likely to be renters than homeowners. And so even if you're paying your rent on time, that isn't baked into the credit scores. And so now there's a lot of effort to make sure that that information is captured. And why aren't we homeowners? Well, systemic racism. And so on the surface, it appears that credit scores are race neutral, but they're not, because of the information that goes into the algorithms that make up a credit score.
Excellent. Kristen.
So I think when we talk about Black people having lower credit scores, as an economist, I like to disaggregate things and give the actual numbers. So these numbers are from Shift in 2021, and these are averages. So for Black people, it was 677, Hispanic, 701, other, 732, white, 734, and Asian American, 745, right? So we see a really, really big difference. I don't want to just say that Asian and white people's scores are higher. It's a lot higher, and it makes a lot of a difference when you're trying to buy a house. Even when you're trying to get an apartment, as Michelle said, we are more likely to be renters, but even when you're trying to do a rental application, they do check your credit score. So it can keep Black and Hispanic people from even being able to rent a place.
Well, we definitely want to talk about why that is. But before we get to that, Arnita, let's answer the question. Why should Black people care about America's credit system?
Well, I believe that we should care about the credit system is because everything that is on our credit report is, our reputation, and our credit worthiness is going to be judged. However, I do believe that it is important that we as African Americans make this type of education generational and more resourceful when it comes to learning this type of information, so that we can continue to hang into the credit scoring game. Yes, there are different, of course, algorithms and all that great stuff. However, it's important to also know that the information that is on our credit report is being reported by the data furnishers. And that is our credit, our lenders, student loans, those who we are paying. Those lenders have a subscription to the credit reporting agency, and hence that information is what's being reported. So it's important for us on our end to ensure that we are paying our bills on time, especially the information that is being reported onto the credit report, because that is what is going to generate our actual credit score.
Irv, why should Black people care?
I think people of color and minorities as well, Hispanics like myself, I saw my parents lose their home back when the economy collapsed in 2008. I brought up a statistic here, which comes from the Pew Research Center for Social and Demographics. In 2009, Hispanics lost 66% of their net worth, African Americans 53%, and whites only 16%. A lot of that has to do with the way the scoring system is built and our lack of education in our communities, being that we receive subprime loans due to that 3-digit score known as FICO.
Yeah. So let's talk about how the credit score works. How does the credit system works? Kristen, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so it looks at how we pay our bills and how long we've had credit, what's the longest credit, be it a credit card or any type of loan that a person has had, how many late payments there are affects it. And so I think one of the things to know is that paying a bill late doesn't necessarily impact your credit. You have to be so late that whoever that creditor is reports it, right? So when it goes into collections, things like that, they're supposed to tell you when it's going to go on your credit report. And so one of the ways to get your credit score to be higher is to pay things on time and to not close credit cards when you don't necessarily need them, but to not have an outstanding balance. Or if you want to get your credit score to go up, to go ahead and pay off things if you're able to have like a high amount available. So if you have a credit card that has an 8,000 amount limit, but you pay it off every month, then it shows that you have $8,000 in available credit, but that you're paying it off, that you're using credit responsibly. But I think one of the things that you have to do, you need to have a bank account. And so hopefully we can talk about access to banking and how that has been affecting credit, particularly for Black people over the last 30 years.
Interesting. We will get into that. So what hurts your credit score the most and what hurts your credit score the least, Arnita?
What hurts the credit score the most, what a lot of people may not understand is lack of credit and having high utilization. You do not have a great utilization, then it is letting other lenders know that you are a high risk. Perhaps you are using your credit to extend your, or perhaps you are in some type of financial bind as to why you're having to lean more on your credit. So just because a creditor is extending an amount of credit to you does not mean that you have to max it out. Another rule of thumb to understand is, I hear this utilization all the time, which is 30%. And contrary to what a lot of us believe, is literally in between 1 and 10%. 30% is close to 50%, which is halfway maxing out the card. So we also have to understand that we have to beat the cycle also, which means if you are paying on your credit card, for example, and you have a certain amount to over a high or utilization, then it is best to try to get that amount down before that information is reported onto the credit report.
Hold that thought, Arnita. Hold that thought. Irv, she said your credit utilization should be between 1 and 10%, not 30%, contrary to popular belief. Your thoughts on that?
I agree with her 100%. I think that if you're floating it between that 1 to 10% mark, that helps you out with not seen as a risky file to a lender. This is no different from when someone goes to purchase a home. There's something called a front end and a back end DTI, which is a debt to income ratio, which is what they use to determine how much they're going to lend you. So the closer you want to float that between that 1 and 10 range, the better you are in terms of getting higher credit limits and opening up more accounts with different banks.
Yeah, can I just add? So I think it was Experian looked at people who have credit scores above 800. So for the FICO score, it goes from 300 to 850, 850 being the highest and the best score. So they looked at people who had scores over 800 and they saw that their utilization of credit was about at 7%. But it's also across all the cards and month to month. So there's lots of people who pay their credit card bills off every month. But if you're still using a lot of credit within that month, it can still impact you having a higher score. Now, if I could just brag a little bit, I've had an 850 credit score for about 2 years. And so I've been watching and doing different things to see what impacts when that might dip below 850.
The differences between ethnically or between credits, different ethnicities, credit scores. And I believe you said Black people have around a 600. You said Hispanics around 700, white people around 734, and Asians above 745. Why? Why such a dramatic difference?
So for Black people, the average in 2021 was 677. And so we could start at a number of different points, but I want to start with banking, because how do you get a credit card, or a good credit card, at least from a bank, right? So let's talk about banking. If we look at, this is by race, unbanked, underbanked, or fully banked. So for white people, only 3% were unbanked. And this is from 2019. That's compared to 14% for Black people and 10% for Hispanic. That means that they don't have a bank account. Underbanked may mean that you have a checking account, but not a savings account, that you don't have full use of the things that that bank offers. So for white people, 11%, Black 32, Hispanic 22. Now, fully banked, white is 86%, Black only 54%, Hispanic 68%. So the first thing is, do you have a bank account, or are you having to use a payday lender or some other means to cash your paycheck or get access to being able to get a loan, right? So if you have a bank account, then that would make it easier to be able to obtain credit at a lower rate. And then we could look at this whole big circle of, what does that mean, right? So if you're paying more for credit, you're using more of your income, that means less money available to get a higher education, to purchase a home, to have a home to pass on to the next generation. So it really creates a big circle that impacts particularly the Black community, starting with banking.
Irv, is this credit system in America, is it oppressive?
I definitely believe that there are some parts in the intricacies of how it's built that can definitely keep certain demographics out. In regards to kind of piggybacking off of what she just mentioned with what we call the check system. Let's say if someone can't get access to a bank account, that also means that it's going to be really difficult for them to open up new lines of credit, because there's no way for them to trace their income. That being said, it's more probable, with the statistics she just finished sharing, that that's happening both in Hispanic households and in African American households due to the income that those areas earn. So what ends up happening, just a little backdrop on that, with the check system, if you're not familiar with it, this is kind of like a stain on your banking profile, totally different from your credit profile, which means that if you have, let's say, a Wells Fargo account that gets closed out due to, let's say, overdrafts, let's say you lost your job, you were unable to make those payments, that stain now stays with you when you go to apply for new bank accounts, and that goes for both savings and checking accounts.
And now it's actually sticking with you when you go to apply for jobs or when you go to apply for rent. It's really touching us in a major way, when at a time when we probably should be getting rid of the credit score system. It's impacting our lives even more. Michelle.
Yeah, but there's some good news on the front. Capital One has eliminated overdraft fees, which will go a long way to help people who are afraid of having bank accounts or who had bank accounts closed because of overdraft fees. And then Bank of America recently announced that they are going to be cutting their overdraft fees and then eventually eliminating them. Because there are a lot of reasons why people don't open up bank accounts, because they're definitely afraid, and rightfully so, of overdraft. And those fees can be, hundreds of dollars. I've had to talk family members into opening bank accounts and they're like, oh no, I don't want to be overdraft. And that's how they sort of approach it. So I think those moves will really help the unbanked get back into the banking system. But, and think about it, it's not because people are necessarily irresponsible, but when you're living on the edge and you're living paycheck to paycheck, just overdrafting $1 could send you down a tunnel of a whole bunch of money. And I think, the banks have used overdraft and these, punitive measures to sort of hammer people into, quote unquote, being better bank customers, not recognizing that, let's just talk about historically, we make less money, we have, more family members to take care of. When we get a good job, you got peaches and all them on your bank account, because you're trying to help our relatives. So
I don't know why the hell you got peaches and them on your bank account. But I will say this, these banks have made billions upon billions of dollars from fees alone.
That's right.
And it is totally unfair to America's people. And it only helps corporations. I think
That's
it's
right.
a horrible thing.
But
and you're right. I mean, if you have a medical emergency and you have to, pay a medical bill or something of that nature, then you're looking at possibly overdrafting an account. And then the way the banks handle overdraft fees is highly inappropriate when it comes to dealing with their customers and their clients. They will overdraft you, then charge you twice for the overdraft. And there's a lot of, I don't want to get into it. Arnita, go ahead.
Because is it a banking issue or is it a us issue?
It's a banking issue, Arnita. It is a banking issue.
Is it an education issue? Is it a budget issue? Myself, someone who came from Section 8, from majority of my adult life being in poverty, making no more than $12 an hour, being on food stamps. At some point, I had to take responsibility and say, hey, you know what? I need to look at spending. I don't need to go over. I can't lend peaches any money if I can barely take care of myself. I have to put an end of having to rob Peter to pay Paul. Yes, there is a generational gap. Yes, there is a wage gap. However, I am in control of my own money. So that means if I am working a low-paying, dead-end job, then maybe I need to update my resume, but get some professional development and find somewhere else to work. Maybe this means I need to cut something. This means I need to cut out a percentage of my lifestyle expenses so that I can be in the banking world. Maybe it means that I need to take control, all right? Because for me, trust me, I come from a family that did not have it all. But one thing my mother taught me was how to take care of my credit. And yes, I may have messed up a few times here and there. And yes, there are laws that there needs to be more fairness when it comes to the credit system. However, I don't want to make this so much of a Black thing or a people of color thing as opposed to a responsibility thing.
Kristen, listen, Arnita says that her mom taught her about credit. And she's right when she says the education is probably the thing that Black folk and Hispanics lack the most when it comes to finances, money, banking, credit scores. But she also says it's your fault if you overdraft. How do you feel about that?
According to a 2020 survey data from Bankrate, minorities, millennials, and Northeasterners reported paying higher bank fees. So let's start there. So the data showed that the average checking account holder at a bank or credit union paid $8 per month in fees. According to, those are routine service charges, ATM fees, overdraft penalties.
I have to stop you right there, Kristen, because I have to know. How do we know that Black people and Latinos have higher fees? Like, is the bank looking at us and saying, charge the Black person higher fees? Is that really happening?
And I have the data. So this is from Bankrate. I did not make this up. White checking account holders reported paying the lowest amount in monthly bank fees, $5 a month compared to $12 for Black account holders and $16 for Hispanic account holders. So that's number one. We also know that Black people make less money on average, even for the same job, right? So it's not even just update your resume and get another job. Like that may not make a difference, right? I'm not saying that people shouldn't want to improve themselves or get another job or get a job that pays more, but there is discrimination. Like it really does exist. We know that Black people and women often get paid less for doing the very same job. So I think we have to start there.
Let's take a quick break. Come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the business of being Black today is America's credit score. Kick it or keep it. Woo, Michelle, you were about to go in. I know you were before break. So let's hear it.
I mean, when you were asking about those figures about why we pay more, and it really is both are true, that the industry and the policies work against Blacks. It's also true that while we are trying to correct those issues, we have to do better or understand the system. So one of the reasons why we pay more is because it seems counterintuitive. The more money you have, the less fees you pay because you can keep money in the bank. So I have all kinds of accounts. I pay no bank fees because I have direct deposit. I keep a good cash cushion. And so the bank says, oh, if you're going to keep your cash here, we're not going to charge you for your checks. But when you're living on the edge, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't often can afford to do that. You can't keep money in the account because it's constantly going out. So that's why it's important to find banks that allow you to have free checking and free serve savings. Oftentimes you need to look for credit unions where the fees are non-existent or very, very low. So that's where Anita was talking about, education. So, even with my own children who are growing up in an upper middle class family, I have to walk them through how to establish credit, how to have bank accounts. So they've had bank accounts since they were in, not grade school, but middle school, how to make sure you don't overdraft, and none of my children had credit cards in college. So once they got close to graduating from college, then I got them a secure credit card and helped them build up credit. In less than 6 months, my oldest had, credit scores over 700, but I taught her how to do that. But we also have to fight a system which takes advantage of people who make less. It makes no sense that you're charging me free when someone who has barely a living wage job has to pay $15 a month or $8 a month for a checking account. That's where it's unfair and inhumane.
And that's also where it seems to be a form of oppression. When you say, hey, if you keep $1,000 in your account every month, we're going to waive the fees. If you keep under $1,000 in your account every month, we're going to charge you $20 a month.
That's
that
exactly
right there is horrific and very much a form of oppression, Irv.
The way that I see it is it's kind of going back to what Michelle just said. Yes, it goes back to education. Yes, it goes back down to how we keep ourselves informed, both as minorities and the people of color. But I think it also goes back down to understanding the actual guidelines and the rules of how difficult it can be to get things removed off of your credit report. Check this out. 34% of Americans have at least one error on their credit file. That's a third of the US population. Taking that a step further, the officer for the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, think of them as the big brother that tries to regulate and keep accountable the three credit bureaus, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. He mentioned in a recent publication that there is no incentive to actually get these negative items removed from someone's credit file, which, just like we mentioned earlier, that can mean a 50 to 100 point drop on your credit, which, by the way, if you are working to put your kids in a better school zone, guess what determined that? That's right, a 3-digit score.
Hold on, Irv, I want to go back a bit. He said there is no incentive to investigate negative credit reports?
No incentive, so much so that only 25% in 2019 actually had a positive review, meaning the three credit bureaus, again, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, they actually reported that something was done about someone's credit, meaning they actually responded to your dispute letter. In 2021, get this, only 2% was actually responded to.
That's right.
So when you say, Michelle, Irv, when you say there's no incentive to investigate negative reports, do you mean there's no incentive for the person, the creditor, or there's no incentive for who to investigate that?
No incentive for the credit bureaus. What a lot of people end up getting confused is that they think the credit bureaus work for us in our favor, the consumer. That's not true. They actually favor the creditor. That's their client, not us.
But
so do you think those three credit bureaus should be eliminated, Irv?
I definitely think we need a reform, 100%. We have to remember that they are private for-profit companies. Yes. They're not government agencies, which is why some of the scare tactics that these collection companies can use as leverage. And again, this boils back down to lack of education and financial literacy.
Ernita, I hear you trying to chime in there. Let's go.
We also have to understand that, of course, and yes, the credit bureaus are for-profit organizations who do not get an incentive for correcting inaccuracies on the credit report. However, by law, they must. okay, if one files a dispute. But it's also important to understand that the actual data furnishers are the one who have subscriptions to the credit bureaus, and they are the ones who are reporting such information. So if we are finding such errors on our credit report, it's important to go to the source, and that is the one who is actually reporting the information to the credit bureau incorrectly, which is our creditors or the lenders. Everything on our credit report, all right, it is there because it is paid to be there unless it is a public record. So what that means is if we have a found inaccuracy on our credit report, don't just leave it up to the credit bureau's responsibility to correct it. It is also our responsibility to go to the data for reporting such information as well. The biggest issue with that is, as Irv, we don't know how that, all right? That is something that isn't really taught us. However, there are credit consumer laws in place, such as the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Fair Billing Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, that states that everything on the credit report must be accurate, verifiable, or reporting timely. And if not, that information must be updated or removed. That
but we all
is
know,
the law.
Arnita, we all know what a process that is, what an agonizing process that is.
It is. It is. But again, this is our credit report, our credit reputation, our credit responsibility. I never said that the playing field was fair, but what I am saying is we have to understand how to beat them at their own game so that we can leverage our credit so that we can have access. It's not fair.
Yeah, so here's the problem.
Hold that thought, Michelle. Go ahead, Irv. What were you saying?
No, I agree with her. It's just it's a little easier said than done.
Right.
I mean, here's a statistic behind that. And again, this report just came out earlier this year, 2022. They received more than 700,000 complaints to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion between January of 2020 to September of 2021. 700,000 complaints to the CF.
That's a horrible thing that these companies are private. So you have to wonder, why do private companies have a right to our private financial business in the first place? I mean, it seems unfair, doesn't it, Michelle?
Well, first of all, when we sign up for credit cards and all these kind of agreements, there's usually a clause that allows them to report it. So we actually have given them permission. We just don't know it because how many people read those agreements that we sign, and then you can't get it, the loan or the credit card, if you don't sign it. So it doesn't matter. You're gonna give them permission whether you know it or not.
I think what I'm saying, though, when I say that, I understand that we give them permission when we sign, when we sign on the dotted line. But I guess what I'm really saying is we have to have credit in order to survive in America. So it's not like we have a choice.
That's right. We don't. And to Irv's point about that report from the CFPB, here's the thing that if anybody's watching, the reason why those companies were not responding to those errors is because a lot of times they came from third-party credit repair companies. So do not use a credit repair company. The credit bureaus don't like dealing with them, and they won't deal with them. And that was the crux of that report. That's what the credit bureau said. So there's all this finger pointing, and really we just want to give them all a finger because they're not helping us. I've had to try to remove incorrect information, and it was like you're being in automation hell. I mean, it was hard, and I'm very educated. I got 2 degrees, and it took me months. How is a regular person who's got to work a 9 to 5, maybe have internet access, maybe not, don't necessarily have the skills to write a letter continually and call and talk to people in a way that will make them realize that this does not belong on my report. And so what the CFPB, which is a consumer watchdog, is saying that we need to update the laws so that both the credit bureaus and the data furnishers are responsible for investigating these claims. Because what often happens is the credit bureau says, you've got something on your report, you call them, they call the data furnisher. The data furnisher just electronically sends the same bad information back to them, and they say, oh, this is correct. So you've got to correct it.
Everyone is smiling because everyone knows this toxic process. Let's take a quick break, Arnita. We'll come back to you. And Kristen, we're going to get to you. We got to get to a break. Come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. One of my favorite topics is America's credit score, y'all. The Business of Being Black today is about America's credit rating system. Should we kick it or should we keep it? Please welcome credit expert Arnita Johnson Hall, a fellow in the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, Kristen Brody, online educator Irv Pena, and the personal finance columnist for the Washington Post, Michelle Singletary. Welcome, everybody. Arnita, before we went to break, you wanted to chime in real quick? Go right ahead.
Yes, I did. And what I wanted to add is one of the biggest things that society states, especially with credit bureaus and creditors, a lot of finance experts, is not a credit repair company in the event that you need assistance. And that just can't be any more farther from the truth. I myself
say that again. Say that one more time. Say that one more time so we all get it.
Society, the credit bureaus, creditors, and oftentimes financial specialists, gurus, or educators will inform everyday consumers not to go to credit repair companies. And that is one of the issues as to why we are going through what we're going through today, is because in the event that you seek help when it comes to getting your credit corrected, that is where you need people like me, 15 years in, nominated by Investopedia 3 years in a row as the best credit repair company in credit education. And that's because people like me and companies that I represent do know the credit consumer laws. So again, if you don't know how credit works, if you do not have time to dispute inaccuracies on your credit report, that is where people like us come in. But that is one of the biggest myths out here, is not to go to people like us when we are the ones on the back end servicing so many people and allowing them to reach their credit goals. It is vital that you seek expert assistance in the event that you repairing your credit is not easy, all right? And we also know that the more inaccurate your credit report, the more derogatory your credit report is, the more profitable it becomes to the credit bureaus, because they are going to in turn sell their data to creditors and lenders, who are in turn going to pull your credit report and charge you higher interest rates, higher APRs, putting down higher deposit, and asking for a cosign.
So everybody's winning but the people. Kristen, listen, should we get rid of this system?
Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question. But what I will tell you is that we are starting to see options. That the FICO score is not the only way. We're starting to see fintech companies provide things like interest-free buy now, pay later capabilities. We're starting to see earned wage access. There have been debates about this. I testified before the House Financial Services Committee about this in November. And I guess if you look at things like layaway credit cards and even payday lenders, which we see are overrepresented or overconcentrated in Black neighborhoods, these things, these new technologies are another option. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but many times the interest isn't as high, the penalties aren't as high, and so they are starting to provide.
I have not, listen, the stores, have long stopped the layaway thing. I think Walmart may still have it. I don't know. But layaway was my thing, back in the day. But I don't understand these credit card companies having layaway. It blows my mind. It seems totally, it just does not seem, it seems non-productive. If you have $1,000 credit balance, right? And you get to pay on a portion of that $1,000 credit balance versus paying off the $1,000 credit balance, you're just kind of paying a credit card within a credit card. What kind of sense does that make, Kristen?
It doesn't make much sense. And that's why I'm talking about specifically paying for. So it's for payments that if you can't make it, then you don't get to use that creditor anymore, right? So the creditor then loses. For earned wage access. So they give you access to your wages earlier than you would get it normally. Mm-hmm. And if you don't pay them back, then you don't get to use them again. It's not like the revolving nature of a credit card where you're paying, 9 to 24% interest each month, right? So we're not seeing that sort of compounding like you would with a credit card or a payday lender. So it provides access to credit for people who need it,
Yeah, and the
without all of
interest
those
rate
things.
alone just screams Sweet Daddy from Good Times. But Irv, this is what I want to talk about. Dave Ramsey says, kick the credit cards, pay everything cash, buy used cars. Don't go in and buy new cars. Don't go to college. Don't go to college, but don't take out loans for college. And then you have Susie Orman, who's a little more conservative. And I've confessed on this show before, it was Susie Orman who actually got my credit score back in line. I don't mean personally Susie Orman. I don't know the lady. I'm just saying by me reading her books and watching her shows, it got my credit card straight. And then I began to open myself up to literally researching and finding out about credit and what makes it go up and what makes it go down and how you can actually manipulate and, like Arnita says, beat the system. So is there one particular way to get your credit together, Irv?
The fastest way to get your credit together is going to be by paying off your credit card on time, every single month. Everyone wants it sugar-coated. Everyone wants a different answer. I'm sure that everyone has their own philosophy. If you purchase
It's
something
like losing weight. The quickest way to lose weight is to eat right and exercise. That's it. So,
everyone falls in love. No, 100%. It's like losing weight. Everyone falls in love with the prize, but we all hate the process.
Yeah.
And the process is, if you took something on credit, you must pay it back to the lender on time. A lot of the things that I put out in terms of content to my audience is I haven't paid any interest on any of my credit cards in years. The reason for that is because even if I run up $1,000 balance, I make sure to keep enough money in my account. So when that balance is due, I just pay the $1,000 right back. But guess what happens on the back end from being a good financial steward? I'm now reaping the rewards with benefits. So now I get to travel for free. I also get to earn the rewards in terms of points. So now if, let's say, I wanted to go out and splurge on a nice dinner, or if I wanted to get fancy and pick up some nice shoes or maybe a nice bag for my wife, I can go ahead and pay that from a cushion of the credit card companies. I
hear you, Irv, but I have to say I call BS on all them points and all of that, all them incentives and rewards, mainly because you just sat here, Irv, and said, I will spend $1,000 on my credit card, but I have the cash in my bank already to pay the whole credit card off. So the question becomes, why the hell do we need credit in the first place if we have cash and we're just going to pay it to them? I mean, it just makes no sense. And this is what Dave Ramsey says, pay everything cash so that you won't be beholden to the system. But we are beholden to the system because the system requires us to have credit. So with that in mind, should the government take over the credit system, Michelle?
I think there is some room for lots of reform, which may involve the government taking it over. But we have to understand the government doesn't necessarily run everything well either.
I think we know that.
So that we may be trading one bad system for another bad system. Look at what's happening with tax season. You know, with the IRS, they haven't funded them. We can't get through with problems. So I'm not sure. I think that the threat of cutting it will hopefully make both the credit bureaus and credit furnitures or the data furnitures do better with their interaction with consumers. And I think, it's one of those things. My husband always says we're in violent agreement when we're talking about different things. I think all of us are in violent agreement that you need credit to get the big things. And that's where I differ a little bit from Dave Ramsey. We need credit to buy a home because most of us cannot buy a home outright. You need credit maybe to buy your first car. You only need one car loan because after that, you will never need another car loan. If once you finish that car loan payment, you make those payments to yourself, you keep your car for about 10, 15 years, then you have the money to buy a car with cash.
Yeah, ain't nobody trying to do that, girl. Ain't nobody trying
you will do that if you want to, Bill.
Ain't nobody trying to keep a car for 30 years, Michelle. What are you out there talking about?
You wanna build wealth, you keep that car.
Listen, I have to say, I have had my Toyota Solara for 13 years.
Right.
Let the record show.
So the point is that you can use credit a little bit and then not use it and build credit. You don't actually have to actively use the credit to have a good credit history. I've got 850. I don't really use a lot of credit. I haven't had a car loan in I don't know, 20, 30 years now. maybe not 30.
You ain't had a car in 2030. You have not had. Okay, I got to go to break. They won't even let me get on about the car. We'll take a quick break. Come right back on The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack, where the business of being Black today is America's credit rating system. Kick it or keep it. Please welcome credit expert Arnita Johnson-Hall, a fellow in the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, Kristen Brody, online educator Irvin Pena is here with us, and the personal finance columnist for the Washington Post, Michelle Singletary. Kristen, let's talk about HBCUs and student loans and how credit can affect education or not.
Yes, I think the first thing is why do we even have HBCUs? And it makes me think of a quote that my boss often says. His quote is that there's nothing wrong with Black people or the Black community that ending racism won't fix. So I thank Andre Perry for that thought. I want to talk about who takes out student loans. So first of all, Black people, if we're looking at the percent who borrowed, 86.4% of Black people compared to 70.3% of white people. And then how much did they borrow? Average of $29,390 for Black people compared to $21,184 for white people. That's
about how much my loan is, about $29,000.
So we see that Black people are more likely to need to take out a student loan. They're more likely to take out a loan for more. They're less likely to be getting a degree from a public institution, more likely to be going to a private institution, and also they're more likely than their white counterparts, more likely to be going to a for-profit institution, right? So that's the first thing. If we're looking at why people need credit, a student loan, getting a higher education is one of them. I, of course, having worked at Dillard and Howard, and this semester I'm teaching at Spelman, I have to promote HBCUs. Studies have shown that they can be a better value in terms of networking, getting a job, earning a higher wage, producing STEM graduates, producing engineers. So for all of these reasons, I have to promote HBCUs, and shout out to Alcorn State University and Jackson State University.
Well, I definitely have to shout out Bennett College, I have to shout out my own HBCU alma mater, Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. So who allowed me to go to college absolutely free, no loan. On the other hand, UNCG swallowed up all my $29,000.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I have one degree from Alcorn, two from Jackson State, and my education was free, partially because of scholarships from a number of different sources, not just that my parents were that wealthy.
Tell us about the work you're doing at Brookings Institution.
So I do a couple of different things. I'm getting eaten alive on Twitter right now because my Jobs Day blog looked at what's going on with Black women. So that seems to have triggered some people when we talk about how unemployment is affecting Black women. For whatever reason, people seem to attack us, but I break down the jobs report by race. I look at race and jobs at risk of being automated, how fintech companies can mitigate the racial wealth gap, and how the pandemic has affected particularly Black communities.
Irv, you are a business coach, also financial resources and credit expert. So tell us about how you deal with those tools with your clients.
In terms of their credit or with their loans?
Either or.
So my thought around loans, I just find it fascinating how we can put an 18-year-old into a $25,000, $30,000 debt. But when a business owner goes in with a business plan, they run them through the mill, and odds are they won't even get them anything other than, would you like to open a checking account with us? I think a lot of that has to do with not just a racial thing, but putting people into a system that kind of keeps them running a hamster wheel, keeping profits for someone else instead of them being able to get out of the rat race.
Yeah. Arnita, please tell us about the Mastery Masterclass.
Thank you. So Dispute Mastery Masterclass is teaching individuals how to beat the credit system at their own game and repair their experts. So I teach everyday people how to thoroughly audit their credit report, attack errors, and how to properly communicate with the credit bureaus and understand the easiest credit consumer laws to ensure that the information on their credit report is reporting timely, can be verified, and reporting accurately.
Michelle, you are a writer and finance is your thing. So tell us what we should know that you're writing about now, specifically in terms of our finances.
So I write a lot about debt and staying out of debt. I write a lot about how people can send their kids to college with, no loans or little loans. And over this past year, I was writing quite a bit about stimulus payments, the child tax credit, the changes to that, and now going into the tax season, how to navigate what is going to be a hot mess of a tax season as people try to get, past stimulus payments that they didn't get, or money for the child tax credit. And also just encouraging people to not look for that tax refund, that to change how they pay their taxes so that they get that money during the year and not lend it to the government pretty much for a year interest free.
Yeah, you know who taught me that lesson? And it's so simplistic. It was Oprah Winfrey. She had a show one day, and she said they were talking about taxes and debt and all of that. And I guess the guests talked about getting their tax refunds. And Oprah was like, tax refund? I've never gotten a tax refund. And I was like, why don't Oprah get a tax refund? Because, at the time I was getting like $200 tax refunds. Happy, joy, joy. And so I researched why Oprah didn't get a tax refund. And I found out is because she makes more money. So I'm like, oh, so people who make more money don't get refunds? That's not necessarily true right now with the way that the last administration handled the tax codes. So Elon Musk is not paying taxes. And now the little people like me are paying taxes. So it's all interesting how it works out. But yeah, I do understand what you say when you say that, Michelle, about keeping your money throughout the year versus getting one big solid check at the end of the year. But there's something about those big checks that we like.
Yeah, can I just go back to something that I need to talk about, credit repair? So let's just be clear about what I'm saying. It seems to be what you're doing is offering good education, but there are the industry is rampant with scams and schemes. And if people end up paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to so-called improve their credit or help them with credit, and it ends up making things worse because either it's a scam and they do nothing, or they bombard the credit bureaus with changes to their credit report, which are legitimate. They literally did not pay the bills. And so that's why I advise them, if you're going to use a company, be sure that you're not paying more than you should. Or paying for something that you
Arnita is saying that ain't her. That ain't her.
But I'm just saying that the industry.
That's not a lot of people in the industry, being that I have certified over 1,000 credit entrepreneurs to become board certified credit consultants with the Certified Credit Consultants Association.
It's a little different than what I'm talking about, but I just think we need to be very careful about encouraging people to go to credit repair companies.
No one can dispute accurate information, not even the individual itself. Just because something is derogatory and is being reported onto the credit report doesn't mean that it is reporting accurately.
Unfortunately, we have to close the show out. Thank you so much, Kristen, Irv, Michelle, and Arnita. Stick around because Claudia Jordan is coming up with TGIF. That concludes The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul.